YouTube Oziko and the Goat House is back with our updated NFL power rankings heading into week 2 of the NFL season. We'll update these every single Tuesday, and they are based on how teams are playing. These aren't power rankings that are going to stay the same. They're not future predictions. They're not playoff predictions, nothing like that. Some people do them that way. So how teams play matters. Teams essentially decide where they are ranked in my power rankings. So usually a bit of movement in the first few weeks. So excited to show you guys the movement we have heading into week 2. Loads of content every single week. You see the schedule on the bottom left, our weekly picks tonight. Can't wait. Score predictions tomorrow. You guys know the drill. Make sure you like, subscribe to notifications on, Twitter subs, get bonus content. You see what you get underneath me. Sponsors on the bottom right, Liquid IV, GLD Shop, rocking the 49ers chain from the GLD Shop. We have a giveaway with them. They're supplying prizes in our picks league. There's links pinned in the comments for any of that, anything you're looking for. Twitter, which is very important to follow. Live analysis during each game and a lot more. Check it out. On to the power rankings. The Cardinals are going to remain at 32. They put up a fight with the Commanders. Things kind of went their way, and they couldn't really pull it off. I think it's because of the lack of talent. And somewhat similar, who's a better team, but somewhat similar to the Colts at 31, where I think things went their way in their game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, they put up a fight. They had a shot to win, so there's not, a long list of negatives, but I think things went their way, a chance to win. They couldn't pull it off. There was really no room to move them. Number 30 is going to be the Bears, and we'll show the movement at the end of this video, but they moved down a little bit here because they, struggled a little bit on both sides of the ball, maybe a lot more on offense. A lot of the same stuff is just, I was going to say last year, but the past several years, just a very stale offense, nothing really going down the field. And it's a winnable game, you would think, going into the game, not during the game, but home against the Packers, added weapons, a little bit of a game plan problem, but they just could not figure it out. So they are down at 30. 29 is going to be the Carolina Panthers, who Falcons really didn't play all that solid themselves, but the Panthers really couldn't figure it out, end up losing by multiple scores. So that was a tough one. The defense didn't play all that bad, at least. Broncos down at 28. Not much going on offense. Thought Javonte Williams ran pretty tough. Defense was okay. Just a home game against the Raiders. Home field advantage with that altitude there. Usually have a legit home field advantage, and they can't pull it off. So pretty disappointing once again for the Denver Broncos. 27 is going to be the Houston Texans. Honestly, they moved down, they lost, they couldn't score much on offense, but honestly, I think their defense played pretty tough, pretty decent outing. And the Ravens made second half adjustments, and that kind of got the best of the Texans there, but just got to figure it out on offense a little bit, but not the worst outing, could be worse. Titans at 26, thought the defense played pretty well, thought Derrick Henry played well, just the lack of execution on offense, getting points on the board there, pretty unfortunate with that. Fumble for 6, they end up being called incomplete in the, instead of having 7 points, the Saints have 3 points. So that was tough. They could have won the game there. 25, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers come away with a win. They created some turnovers. Yeah, the only thing with the Bucs, does my opinion on them really change? It was good to get out with a win, but yeah, they squeaked by while winning the turnover battle 3-0. They kind of need things to go their way. They did get outplayed, but they found a way to win, so they are going to move up because of that. In a winnable game against the Bears this week, so we'll see if the Bucs can continue to climb here. 24, the Commanders, somewhat rare for teams to move down a little bit after they win. 99% of the time when that's the case, it's because other teams I feel like just have to move ahead of that team. So the Commanders did win, and they moved down a couple spots. A team's never gonna move down for when they win if they look like very solid. They win especially if they win in dominating fashion, anything like that. So the Commanders, a little sloppy in that game against maybe the worst team, who we think is the worst team in football. Turned the ball over a bit. Nothing was really dominant about that performance. Nothing was really great about that performance. They got out with a win, but main reason they moved down is because there was a couple teams that we'll talk about that I felt like should move ahead of them. So that was the main reason there. And one of those being the Raiders, who move up a couple spots. Not the prettiest win in the world. It was pretty solid. Jimmy Garoppolo played pretty well. There was some bright spots across this team. The Broncos didn't play the best game. The Raiders squeaked by. It's a decent win. So they move up a couple spots. I do think they were deserving of moving ahead of a team that also won in the Commanders, though. Then the Giants moved down to 22, which they're one of the more disappointing teams on the week. We still feel they could be a good team, but they got to go out and show that. Just absolutely dominated. It was against a very good football team, the Dallas Cowboys, but absolutely dominated, embarrassed in New York, primetime football there. Another extremely disappointing team was the Seattle Seahawks. I keep saying it with the Seahawks. I wish there was, like some sort of fluky or week one-ish thing that happened for the reason for the Seahawks losing as bad as they did, but there really wasn't. Like, plain and simple, the Rams were just completely the better team, and that really shouldn't be. So it's only week one, but that kind of a little eye-popping, makes you think a little bit. So a tough go for the Seahawks. Again, right today, we're not going to predict with these power rankings. We're not predicting with this statement. But today, the Rams are just better than the Seahawks. And again, that probably shouldn't be. But that's what we learned from that game. So them and the Giants were extremely disappointing this week. 20, the Patriots, they stay put. They started a little sloppy. That wasn't great. And that ultimately is probably why they lost. But they showed some promise as the game went on, some bright spots on both sides of the ball. Again, you got some optimism, even though they come away with the loss. Going forward, some upside with the New England Patriots. So I guess there's that, but didn't really see a reason to move them, based on what they did and based on the teams, what's going on around them. Some teams moved below them. Some teams, moved ahead of them, obviously. 19, the Atlanta Falcons. We went up a couple spots. They played pretty well on defense. Jesse Bates was fantastic. The running game, the running back duo was fantastic. It's a little stale on offense, mainly the passing game. They didn't really gain a whole lot of yards. The Panthers actually outgained them in that game. So there are some bright spots, but it's hard to move them up a whole lot. Wasn't super convincing, when you evaluate the Falcons here. 18 is going to be the Rams with the biggest boost out of any team in the NFL this week. They were down at 29 heading into the season. So big boost. I mean, they just completely were the better team against the Seahawks. There was nothing like fluky that happened. They just, out-coached the Seahawks. They very, very well coached in that game, both sides of the ball, and they just outplayed them, dominated them, really. Dominated time of possession. Stafford looked good. Other guys stepping up with Cooper Kupp out. Defense played much better than expected, so was very much impressed with the Rams. Will this keep up? We will see, but they're moving up for now, for sure, after that dominating performance. Stafford healthy, I guess they're a tough team. They're a sneaky team, so I guess this range of the power rankings kind of makes sense, but will they continue to stay healthy? I guess is what will decide how the Rams will be. 17 is going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were one of the more disappointing teams in week one as well. I mean, they just got obliterated. They played a very good team, but they got completely dominated on both sides of the ball. They looked very sloppy when they did not look. They looked very smooth in preseason, the starters, that is. I don't care about the backups in preseason, but a lot of panic, from Kenny Pickett. The offensive line was not good. Deontay Johnson wasn't good. The defense wasn't good. You worry about the corners, the linebackers. Cam Hayward got hurt, so this just did not feel like a Mike Tomlin team at all. So this was strange. So they definitely moved down some spots. I still like, I guess, the upside and the idea of the team moving forward, but they got to take some strides. They got to eliminate whatever the hell happened in that game. The Vikings at 16, a disappointing loss against the Buccaneers, so they moved down because, again, sloppy and they lost. They did outplay the Bucs. They still have to win, but you kind of chalk it up to some fluky week one turnovers, which there were, especially one big one. But they still moved down after a sloppy loss. But you still think they showed they can be an explosive offense against a pretty good defense. You just got to clean up the sloppy things, and they can win that game and win it big. But still move down because you just can't lose that game at home to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Saints at 15. Not the most convincing win. I guess defensively, the defense looked really good. Love that secondary. They know how to make plays. Olave was great. They could execute a little bit better in the red zone. The Titans do have a pretty good underrated defense, but I did like the defense of the Saints here. So they come in at 15. They move up a couple spots. 14 is the Packers, who get a pretty good boost. They played the Bears, so let's kind of wait and see still what else they can do, but the time will tell. But dominating performance in pretty much on both sides of the ball. Offense looked pretty good. Jordan Love looked pretty smooth. He wasn't like fantastic, but he looked pretty smooth. Really good with his eyes, going through progressions. Aaron Jones was fantastic. Defense made plays when they needed to. So the Packers up to 14 on even moving ahead of the last year NFC North champion, the Minnesota Vikings. So that's a good look for the Packers there at number 14. 13, the Chargers moved down a couple spots. Offense looked pretty good. The running game, I mean, that's something positive. The running game, the new running game, is a thing now. It's actually a thing. Like, it's a lot different than last year, it feels like. Hopefully Eckler's okay. He popped up in the injury report going into week 2. We're early in that process, though, of heading into week 2 and seeing, the dealing with the injuries. But the offense explosive. They played a good team, the Dolphins, and they almost won that game. Couldn't quite do it, but the defense was pretty bad. I mean, really bad. And that's a little concerning. It's only week 1, but it's a little concerning. But they moved down a couple spots. They'll win with their offense at times this year for sure. 12, the Lions move up quite a few spots, and they beat the number 1 Chiefs, so that definitely helps. The tough team looked really solid, clutched it out in the end. Was it super convincing? There was definitely some luck on their side, but they still, that's why if they went out and it was like a convincing win, because my takeaways of that game was, the Lions, deserve some credit, but what was like that's what I was thinking after the game. What was the main reason the Lions won, the Chiefs lost? Everything kind of had to do with the Chiefs, what was going on with the Chiefs. So the Lions, if they made it a little more convincing, going out and just beating the Chiefs, it would have been hard not to move them up a lot more, but they do move up a bit from 16 to 12 after a good win against the Chiefs. And it's kind of just about getting out there with a win in week 1. That's what they did. So the Lions looking pretty promising, going to be a tough team. Maybe the favorites in the NFC North. 11, the Bills, very disappointing last night, Monday Night Football. I mean, Aaron Rodgers goes down right away, and that significantly makes them a worse team, Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson, and the life that kind of got sucked out of that stadium for a little bit. No excuses for the Bills. They absolutely have to win that game, and that's a pretty brutal loss to lose, even though it's close. Josh Allen was pretty bad in that game. Like, he contributed in a big way for the Jets winning, not to take any credit away from the Jets and their defense and Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, guys like that, but that's a brutal loss for the Bills, and they're a good enough team, and Josh Allen's a good enough quarterback for them to figure it out and for them to start winning football games like we're used to them doing. But if they have to go out and do that, they go out and do it because again, these power rankings aren't predictions. So if they go out and do that, they'll climb back up. They decide their fate here, and that's other teams lost in worse fashion, I suppose, like just getting obliterated and just completely outplayed. But that you could argue that's the worst loss of the week, just given the circumstances there on that one. So Bills down to number 11. The Jags are at 10. They're actually at 9 last week, and Jags are explosive. They are a good team. They're going to be a good team. It was really the only reason they moved down a spot was because I felt two teams, the Dolphins and the Browns, who we'll talk about, just impressed me a little bit more, and they were deserving of being at which they're still left here. They're where they're going to be at. So the Jags really only moved down a spot because two teams had to be ahead of them. But if the Jags went out and they were a little more consistent in that game, it would have been, again, if teams win and they, most likely not going to move down, but sometimes they do it. But if they look convincing, everything looks great, then there's no chance of them moving down. So, but mainly Dolphins and Browns. There's two teams that moved ahead of them, and one team, the Bills, that dropped below them. So that's kind of what happened there. But the Jags, they get out there with a win. They're explosive. Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, ETN. These guys are explosive. They can make big-time plays at any given time. I'm excited about it, but they're pretty inconsistent, too. I mean, getting shut down on short yardage, third down, fourth down, interesting play calls sometimes, stupid mistakes, a little sloppy. Colts are pretty, you'd think aren't the best team in football. So the Jags were a little bit sloppy, but I'm excited about them this year. And then number 9 is the Cincinnati Bengals, who I had at 2. But the preseason rankings are kind of like an outlook as well. I picked the Bengals to go to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl actually, and I'm not really going to change that pick based off week 1. I think the Bengals are going to be a really good team. This is what they do early in the year. They struggle early in the year. They kind of adjust and figure it out, and maybe save some stuff. Maybe just takes them a little bit of time to knock off the rust. Joe Burrow again coming off that injury, so I'm not worried. I'm not worried about the Bengals at all. But these are weekly power rankings. The way I do them, we're not going to predict. I'm predicting the Bengals will be fine. I'm pretty confident about it, but they have to go out and show it because that's how I do these power rankings. They have to go out and do it. So a very disappointing outing in week 1. We'll move them down a little bit here, obviously. So go out there and get back on track, and that'll help you in your rankings. But I'm sure the Bengals will be fine as the year goes on. Ravens stay put at 8. First half wasn't that great. I mean, the defense was pretty solid all game. You expect them to be against a young Texans team there. But second half adjustments were good. Injuries were not good. Lamar really wasn't the sharpest. They stay put at 8. Again, I still like what they can be. They didn't have Mark Andrews either in this game, but the injuries are piling up. It's not great, but they stay put at 8. 7, the Cleveland Browns move up a little bit here. Elite defensive performance, which is fantastic. That'll move you up alone. Offense got the job done really with their legs. Look at Nick Chubb and Deshaun Watson and the offensive line. They did what they had to do. They moved the ball pretty well. Actually, moved the ball better than you think, but the defense was just absolutely fantastic. And they don't just do that against a team. They do that against the Cincinnati Bengals. So that definitely means something there, heading into week 2. So the Browns are up to number 7. The Jets are up a spot to number 6. Yes, it's tough because, now do we view them as a worse team because it's Zach Wilson instead of Aaron Rodgers? Yeah, but time, game by game, that week by week, that'll decide things here. The Jets defense is top tier. They can win almost any game. We feel like they just did that to the Bills. So very much deserving of moving of a spot. Breece Hall was fantastic, and Wilson wasn't great, but I guess he helped and clutched up at the end there. So the Jets, they deserve to move up from that one. So they're 6. They're up to 6. Just devastating. That Aaron Rodgers injury, in that fashion, the way it went down, you don't really see ones like that a lot. I don't know. It's just finally there's some optimism about the Jets and just the 4th play in. It's just tough. It's just I feel so bad there. So absolutely devastating. But they won, and they got some momentum. They got some hype after that one. Defense is extremely, extremely impressive. On to the big top 5. The Dolphins move up a good amount of spots here. And this was, I had to think about this because the defense was pretty poor in this game. I guess they clutched in that last drive, but they did play the high-powered offense of the LA Chargers, and they threw some crazy run game at them that they haven't seen from the Chargers yet. So I guess there was a lack of a game plan there for that. But the defense does have to be better. There was a negative there from the Dolphins, but the offense was the best in football in week 1. It showed that it could be a threat at any given time. Any week, any game, any circumstance, down yardage, whatever it may be, over 500 total yards in offense. So that is an offense you just do not want to face. So I thought they were deserving of moving up a bit. How much they impressed me there. And how much you impress me is a big part in my power rankings too. So they are up to number 5. So a good boost from the Dolphins. For the Kansas City Chiefs, the Chiefs moved down a few spots. They were number 1. They did lose. Is the game you think they should win. They were a little disappointed. The receivers were disappointing. I don't want to, move them down a whole lot because I did think they outplayed the Lions in that game. Just some fluky drops was the reason they lost, and then Kelsey being out, Chris Jones being out. But at the end of the day, they did lose, and they were sloppy, so they do got to move down a little bit. It's just one of those ones where it could be like a week 1 thing, so it's like one of those losses where I don't put a ton of stock in it. But again, how you finish, how you play, win, lose, a lot of these things matter in my power rankings, so they do still move down. There was a few teams like that, and there was a few teams where they lost, they got obliterated, or they got completely outplayed. Like those teams they're gonna move down a little bit more. It's just how it works. On to the top 3. Eagles stay put at 3. Eagles might have been a little fortunate in this one. Things kind of went their way and they held on. They could have lost the game still. They made plays early in this one, which I guess ended up being just enough, but they're a little slow on offense. They kind of relied on some plays. But they got the job done. They got pressure on the quarterback. They made plays they needed to on both sides of the ball. Was it a ton? No. I guess a decent amount on defense. But they got the job done. there was really no reason to move them anywhere. The Chiefs lost. I felt like they moved down below them. The Eagles won. So any teams, that anything that was going on around them and how they play, staying put at 3 kind of made the most sense. The Cowboys, who are arguably the best team in week 1, just absolutely dominant. As I was watching that game, I just kept saying this is a damn good football team. This looked like the best defense in football. Just dominant, made big-time plays. The offense was explosive, and they made plays when they needed to. They got the job done, winning in dominating fashion in New York in prime time, in the rain. Very, very impressive. The Cowboys are going to be a dominant regular season team, and they could possibly get over that hump in the playoffs. We will see. But they are most definitely deserving of being 1 or 2 this week. And there could have been a random team that looked as good as like the Cowboys, and we'll show them a number 1 in the movement here, the Niners. A random team that was, that could have looked the most dominant team in the week. But the Cowboys and the Niners were already known as a pretty damn good team. They didn't move up a whole lot. Cowboys move up 4, Niners move up 3. Niners absolutely dominant against a good Steelers. We think it's a good Steelers team. Mid-season form. So it's not like these teams, we plucked these teams because they had a great performance in 1 week and just put them at the top. No, we kind of knew they would be good teams. They're starting towards the top for a reason, and just dominated their opponents, and they weren't really supposed to, in those games. So both those teams, lights out. The 49ers looked a little more polished on offense. The Cowboys' defense is probably a little bit better with the playmaking ability, but week by week power rankings updated based on how you play. These were the best 2 teams in football, and it's not like they can't be the best teams in football the rest of the year. So excited about those 2 teams. A lot of these teams. So you see some of the movement there, and again, there'll be a lot of movement in the first couple of weeks. Just expect that, just because we're going off little, and head-to-head kind of matters. As the year goes on, people always comment, well, this team beat this team head-to-head, but they played a bunch of different teams, and like how they're playing at the time matters. So head-to-head will mean little and little as the year goes on, and it's not everything. But this is how it looks after 1 week. And again, just to stress, I can't stress this enough. Some people do their power rankings where they kind of stay the same, and it's just almost end of the year predictions of how they think these teams are in terms of contenders, playoff, Super Bowl, things like that. Just really not how I do things, not how they should be. This is how they should be done, in my opinion. So, those are my week 2 power rankings. Let me know your guys' thoughts. I always think that teams kind of decide where they're ranked, so I don't really think there's a whole lot to argue about with these. But people will find a way in the comments. That's okay. Always talking with you guys on Twitter as well. Links been in the comments for that. Social media, any important links. Check out our recent videos. We did very well with our picks last week. So I'm excited about those videos for this week. Excited about week 2 NFL action. So hopefully you join us across all platforms. Going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.